hiring. One of the things I'm going to talk about today are really what we call the performance-based hiring disruptors. Many of you have been reading some of Lou's articles of late, and he really talks about three of them, and I'm going to highlight these as we go through the overview today. One is the role of hiring managers and their desire and ability to kind of take responsibility for hiring. Lou calls it the self-service model, and we see a lot more of that, managers getting much more involved and taking a much more proactive role in that. So that's one. Second is really the transition from transactional recruiting to consultative recruiting. And it's the concept of less is more, and I'm going to go through that. It's the idea that we can go out and plaster the world with messages, and ATSs have made this very easy. We take that job description, press a button, blast it out to 100 websites, and we can get a pool, quote unquote, of candidates. But that pool may not be the best quality. And so our contention is that less is more. 20 highly qualified candidates is much better than 300, 400, 500 resumes that come in through an ad that's not targeted. And so we'll talk through that. And then the third concept is the whole concept of understanding and measuring quality of hire prior to hiring, making sure that we're getting a quality individual and doing that before we hire them, not waiting 5, 6, 7, 8 months to know if they're any good or not. So those are some of the things we're going to go through. We are definitely going to be talking about many of the things, not all of the things you put into chat, but let me take you through some of the concepts, and this will be a bit of an opening gamut here. So let me go to the next slide here. While we talk today, I'll be making 3 offers for those who are in certain categories, things that you can do to get more involved with what we're doing here at the Adler Group. That's what those stars represent. So here's the first question. If you know anything about the Adler Group and what we do, you know that we focus on top talent. And top talent is really the top 25% of the market. So here's my question for you. Does the quality of the people you attract represent the best in the field? So if you're a recruiter or a hiring manager on the phone, the people that you're actually attracting with whatever your sourcing methodology is, does it represent the best in the field? Go ahead and put that into chat. Just give me some sense for if you feel like you're really getting to that top 25%, or if you're really getting a lot of average candidates into your pool. Glory says no emphatically with an exclamation point. I believe that the graphic you see on the screen really represents what we see with most companies and organizations, which is there is a small tip of that teardrop that is in the top 25%, but most of the people who we attract and most of the people who apply are not. And so that's the filter that we're going to use as we go through the process today. Now let me give you another question as we go through here, and this is an important question. Is the quality of the people you attract better, worse, or the same as the people currently in your organization? Better, worse, or the same? So just put in chat, better, worse, or the same. Now, as you're putting that in, so worse, that's not good, just so you know, Tony. Our contention is that every hire is an opportunity to raise the talent bar within your organization. And so you should be attracting better people. If you're attracting the same people, you're basically guarding the status quo. If you're attracting better people, you're improving the quality of the talent you're bringing into the company. And so our contention is that we should do that. We should raise the talent bar with every hire. Now, this is a slightly different question. Are you hiring the best people you attract? Meaning, of all those candidates that come in, are you able to hire and close the best ones, or are you having to settle in some way? So you can say settle, or you can say hiring the best in chat. Settle, settle, settle. Yeah, I see some settles. This has to do with how we recruit and close candidates. So the methodology we're going to talk about today is called performance-based hiring. It is based on hiring a talent for every level of position. And the promise and potential of performance-based hiring is that we will attract the best in the field. We will not only attract them, but we will raise the talent bar within our organizations, and the best people, we can not only attract them, but we can actually close them and bring them on board. That's our goal. So with that as the backdrop, I'll just put up a few things for you to consider. I'll do this quickly. There's a book that came out at the beginning of the year. Todd Rose, a professor at Harvard, he runs their Center for Individual Performance, Great book. He mentions performance-based hiring in the book. We've been working with him to really change how companies are looking at talent in their organizations. This is a quote from him. I encourage you to get the book, read it. You can download it on your Kindle. A very good read, and it really blows your mind and changes your mindset about how we select talent and why we do what we do. Now, performance-based hiring has been around since 1997 when Lou published his first book, Hire With Your Head. Since then, we've had many different books come out. They're all based on the methodology that we're going to go over today, which is performance-based hiring, which really has 4 key parts. Now, as a baseline, let me just say this. There are 2 paths to finding candidates. One is the scarcity path and one is the active path. The active path is faster. If there's a surplus of good talent in the marketplace, you can go out and you can advertise a job. It doesn't even have to be a great job, but if there's a surplus of talent, you will be able to find some decent talent to fill that role. If, however, you are in a scarcity situation, and let me define scarcity. Scarcity is there's not enough good people to go around. There's a lot of demand for those people, and they're in short supply, and the very best people are generally passive. So I want you to think about the type of recruiting you're doing and tell me if you're in a surplus situation, lots of good people running around, not enough jobs for them, easy to find, or a scarcity situation for the types of people you want to hire in your companies. So just put scarcity or surplus into chat. Scarcity, Angela says scarcity. I think for the majority of positions, we are in a scarce market. And what I see companies doing is they use a very active approach, and they ignore what we call the top of the funnel. They ignore developing the talent pool, turning leads into referrals, turning referrals into prospects. They want to jump directly from, I placed an ad, I got a candidate, which is easy and it's quicker. But I'm going to make the contention that it may not be the best way to recruit in today's market. It may actually be more expensive and take more time to do it that way, to do just the active channel, than the scarcity path given the tools that we have today. So performance-based hiring is the methodology to do that. So let's look at the talent market. Goal is top 25%. 2 methodologies to go there, the active approach and then the passive approach. The active approach is very transactional. It's about posting things, it's about getting followers, it's about getting people to like you, it's about weeding out those people who apply. It tends to be very transactional. I hear this all the time. You get on the phone with a candidate, you say, here's the job, here's the salary, here's the location, do you want it? That's a transactional recruiting. It's dial for dollars, and it's talking mostly to active candidates. Passive really requires a consultative approach. You've got to have a reason why somebody's going to move. Most of the talent you're going to talk to is going to be fully employed somewhere, and they're going to be respected and liked where they're at, which means you've got to give them some reason to move. When we go to the active pool, we filter by skills and experience. 5 years of this, must come from this industry, must have this degree, must have this background, and we just filter people, and people who don't fit that, we don't consider. On the other hand, there is performance qualified, meaning there are people out there who can do the job. They may or may not have that list of skills and experience we use to filter the active pool by. To get a true passive candidate, you have to have a career move. It can't just be a lateral move. And the focus is completely different. The focus on the passive side is the return on investment on hiring a high-quality individual and the quality of that person you're going to hire as opposed to cost and efficiency and time to hire. So you get the contrast. One goes very quickly. Active is a much faster approach, and if you've got a surplus, you can do that. But if you're going after passive candidates, it's going to be a little bit slower, but the focus is not on hundreds of candidates, or it's really on a core group, a highly networked group that we can access. Rob, you can actually get that, and JJ, I think, posted it in the chat area so you can download it just before we started. So two talent markets. This applies to LinkedIn. We call this LinkedIn, but we also call it for any other activity you're doing as you source and attract candidates. And our goal, once again, we want to filter in the top 25%. Our contention is the passive way is a better way to do that, and actually a much more efficient way in many respects. So the methodology we use, and this is what we do. We go into companies and we look at hiring processes. And we ask ourselves, are the hiring process is designed to attract top talent, wherever that talent may be, or are they designed to attract average or below average talent? That's the first question we ask. And when we find that they're not performing, we find that there are 4 areas that really drive that. And this is what we're going to discuss in some depth as we go through today. Number 1, the jobs themselves are not what we would call good jobs. They're not career moves. They're couched and presented to the marketplace as lateral moves. And they don't describe what success looks like in the job. That's what a performance-based job description does, and that's the first step in performance-based hiring. That is the definition of quality that allows us to get at least a B+ or better candidate in play. If you don't have that in place, it's very hard to qualify somebody as a B+ or better candidate. Number 2 is a very simple concept, but it's very powerful as you think about how to put a sourcing strategy together. We call it talent-centric sourcing. Whatever the best talent is doing to find their next opportunity, we have to map our sourcing strategy to that. And if the best talent isn't going to a job board and looking there, then we're wasting our time and our money and our energy posting. Now, there are other reasons to post. There's job branding reasons to post, but attracting top talent may or may not be one of them if the top people aren't actually going there. So talent-centric sourcing, the best people act differently in the marketplace than average or below average people. We've got to map what we do to what they do. Simple concept, but very powerful. The third idea has to do with how we interview. We call it the 2-question performance-based interview. It's evidence-based, and it is not rocket science. If you are a recruiter on this call, I would expect that you are a much better interviewer than your hiring managers. You should be. You do it more often. But the focus of that interview has to be on stuff that people have done at a very deep level. And I'll give you some flavor for what that looks like as we go through the overview today. And then this concept of integrated recruiting and the idea that we're going to offer what we call the 30% solution. And I'll cover what that is as we go through today. But basically, if I want top talent, I've got to offer them 30% more than they have today. That could be salary, but no HR department is going to approve a 30% increase in salary. So it will have to come from other buckets: job stretch, job satisfaction, job growth, career growth. Those are the buckets. And we'll talk about how we position that with different people. So if you look at performance-based hiring, these 4 things make up the fundamentals of performance-based hiring, and it's what we teach. Now, we have some metrics that go with this. Number 1, if you're a recruiter, you should never present a B+ or a candidate that's less than a B+ to your hiring managers. And if you're a recruiter or a manager, you should never have to interview face-to-face more than 4 candidates to hire 1. If you're interviewing 6 or 8 or 12, you're doing that search 3-4 times, and you shouldn't be. And so we have some metrics that tell us that the process is in control and that we're getting good people. Now, this is where the first star comes in. If you are interested in learning how to do a performance-based job description, and you're a recruiter and you can get a line manager on the phone with us, we're happy to spend a little bit of time with you and actually show you the process by which we would spec a job, and to spend 20 minutes on a phone call one-on-one. If you're interested in that, you can email us at info@adlerconcepts.com. But you have to have a hiring manager with you to do that, because that's one of the ways we introduce it to the hiring team. So if you're interested in that, send us an email. Now, we also believe that hiring managers have to be good at this process. The recruiter has to be able to articulate that, but the hiring manager owns the definition of the performance required and why somebody would want this job. They need to be able to control their emotions and biases during the interview. They need to be able to conduct a great interview. And then they should be able to value performance and potential over experience. And that's something we'll come back to in a minute. So these are the things, and I won't go through every one of these, but if the goal is to get a talent, the hiring manager has to be involved. They have to be involved earlier. And these are the competencies and capabilities we expect a manager to be able to bring to the table. Our ranking system is 1 to 5, not so good 1, all the way to exceptional 5. If you're a recruiter, my guess is you could sit down and in an instant look at these things and say, my manager is good at this, or very good at this, or my manager is not very good at all. Let me ask this question, and I'll ask this of both managers and recruiters on this call. Have you ever lost a good candidate because somebody on the interviewing team blew the interview? Ever lost a good candidate as a recruiter because you sent them to a manager who didn't do a good job in the interview? Or as a manager, you sent them to interviews with people on your team and they failed to do a good job there? This is one of the things, this is why conducting an in-depth interview and covering all job issues and controlling your emotions is very, very important as we go through this process. So managers have a very, very important role. Now, this next slide is something that I've used literally all over the world. And I want you to think about this. What do the best people do differently? Just put this into chat. The very best people you've ever hired on your team, somebody who's an outstanding performer, somebody who you'd like to work with again, what do you observe them actually doing in their work that makes them great? Just put a few ideas into chat quickly. Yeah, they execute, yes. Not just talk. I like that. Get a few more in there. Listen, learn, and communicate, absolutely. Yeah, they work well in teams. They work well with others. They inspire others to do their best work. They collaborate well with others. Yeah, take ownership. I think you've got it. Number one, they consistently exceed expectations. Whatever the goals are, they meet them and they overachieve in those areas. They are good at coaching, managing, developing self and others. They exhibit leadership, which is the ability to have a vision and execute against a plan. That's vision and leadership. They exhibit good problem solving and thinking skills. They can solve problems on their own. They're flexible. They deal with change. They fit into the culture and fit well with their manager. And they get it done with no excuses. Would you agree that that's a fairly good list? If you were to see a candidate at the right level who can do these types of things relevant to the job you've got, do you think you would want to see them as a manager, as a recruiter, or present them? Yeah, Susan will take them right now. Most people will. So now this is where the difference comes in, and I'm gonna make the case for skills qualified and performance qualified, and what's the difference. And this is the first step. Skills qualified is the answer to this question. And I'm just going to say this. If you're a recruiter and you're a manager on this phone and you get together at the beginning of a search and the question you ask each other is, what are we looking for? That is the wrong question. Because what that really gets to us is what we call the job description. It gets to the having, I'm looking for someone with these skills. I'm looking for someone with a BSEE degree. I'm looking for someone with 5 years of industry experience. I'm looking for someone who comes from these companies. I'm looking for someone with an MBA from a top 5 school. And we list these things, and these become the skills qualified filters we'll apply to a candidate. But you've got to ask some questions. How well do these requirements actually predict whether somebody's going to be a top performer? If you find somebody who has all those skills, does that mean they're going to be a top performer in your organization? That's the question. What do you think? When we train hiring managers, this is a big discussion because there is a correlation here, but there are people out there who have the things that we put as having requirements who aren't going to perform very well, primarily because it's not the job they really want. Another question I ask, have you ever met someone with fewer or different skills who is also a top performer? Happens all the time. There are people out there who can do the work at a very high level, but they don't meet the criteria we put out there. And then you've got to ask, if you have a job which is highly spec'd, lots of requirements, and somebody meets all of them, why would a top performer who has all of those things want the job? Because what it looks like is a lateral move. Come here and do exactly what you're doing right now with all the things that you've already done. And every top performer I know wants a new opportunity. They want to learn, they want to grow, they want to expand their knowledge, they want to try something a little bit new in each opportunity that they go through. So that's the wrong question. And that's really skills qualified. The real question, and this is the question we teach managers and recruiters to have, what does the person need to do to be considered successful? The end result of that is a list of performance objectives. And they sound very different than having requirements. It's not 5 years of experience. It's grow sales by 10% in this territory over the next 6 months. It's launch a new product line to get 20% market share by the end of the year. It's build a team in 90 days to be able to deliver this project over the next 120 days or over the next 6 months. That's what performance looks like for a job, and that is the criteria we will use to attract, to interview, and to close candidates, because candidates are very interested in the job. So we ask a few questions. Who would you rather hire, someone with the skills or someone who can achieve the results that we've defined in our intake meeting as the results for this job? And then I ask this of managers, would you at least see someone who has done comparable work but has a different mix of skills than the ones we put in the original job description? Most managers will absolutely see someone if they're capable of doing the work. That's the case that we're trying to make here. This is the difference between performance qualified and skills qualified. When we go out with an ad and we list a whole bunch of qualifications, the people we get is the tip of the iceberg of the people who can actually do the work, because there's a whole bunch of people who didn't see it, didn't apply, who are skills qualified. There's even more people who are performance qualified, and our goal is to get to those people. So that's it. Now, the last piece that we need to add to this concept is the EVP, the employee value proposition. And this is a discussion that we have with hiring managers and recruiters all the time. And here's the question we ask in that intake meeting. Why would a top fully employed person want this job? Somebody who's good at this work, who already has a job, what would they be coming here for? What will they become? What does their future look like? What's their intrinsic motivator? That is what we'll use to advertise the job and to attract the right people. So you get a sense for what this comes down to. What's the employee value proposition? Emphasize the future. And we're going to use this to attract, assess, and recruit top talent, onboard, and manage them. Okay? So that's the first concept of performance-based hiring, how we define the job, what it actually looks like, and how we bring those people on the team. And we go through an exercise to do this. We don't have time to do that on the overview, but I will say this. It's what you do with what you have, not what you have, that matters. I don't care that you have 5 years of experience. I don't care that you have a master's degree in a particular field. What I care about is what you did in that 5 years or 2 years, or what you've been doing with that master's degree knowledge and what you've actually delivered. We'll never compromise on performance. If somebody cannot do the job, we're not going to hire them. However, we will compromise on some of those skills that we think sometimes managers get very stuck on these things. But they're not that important in the long term in terms of performance. So we will work toward getting somebody who's performance qualified into the job, quality work, fit, and of course the rate of change. All right? Now, so that's the first step. Second step has to do with the interview. And we have an 8-step interview process that we teach in the course. I won't go through all the steps. I'm going to focus on just 1 or 2 of them so you get a flavor for it. Interviewing is not rocket science. Anybody can learn to interview. And yet I was just on the phone this morning with a company, brand new company, raised a lot of money in the Bay Area, only 100 people in the company, and in 3 weeks I'm going to go there and I'm going to train all their managers in how to interview and assess talent because they're not very good at it. They just don't do a good job. Even to the point of doing dumb stuff like getting up in the middle of an interview to take a phone call and coming back 7 minutes later. How they treat candidates, they think there's nothing wrong with that. They just haven't had the experience. They haven't been taught. So we have an 8-step methodology for conducting an interview, which really hinges on understanding what a candidate has truly done, understanding what their achiever pattern is, understanding big accomplishments at a deep enough level so we know how they actually did them, who they did them with, and so on and so forth, and asking problem-solving questions relevant to the job. That's the basic methodology. That's the core of the interview. It's an evidence-based assessment, and rather than looking at a point in time, we're looking for a trend of performance over time, and we're looking to create an opportunity gap. The opportunity gap is the difference between what the person gets to do now in their current job or other opportunities they may be considering and what your job offers them. And we have a methodology for creating that gap as part of the interview. So that's part of what we do. So here's the performance-based interview in a nutshell. And I'm just going to give you the core question. We call this the single most important interview question of all time. And it's the MSA question, the most significant accomplishment question. And let me just demonstrate briefly how this is. It might be helpful if you write down on a piece of paper or in chat your most significant accomplishment, something that if I were interviewing you, I could spend 10 to 15 minutes just asking you questions about that, and it would give me a real understanding of what you're capable of doing. That's the MSA question. It goes like this. Tell me about your most significant accomplishment, something you've done you're particularly proud of. I will then give you, you will then give me the typical answer candidates give around accomplishments, which is 90 seconds to 2 minutes, where it's a very high level, I did this in this time frame. You get a very high level. And then I'm going to ask deep fact-finding questions. This is where we really get into detail, and here's how it works. These are the questions I will ask. I want you to describe what you actually did. I want the snapshot of when you started at the beginning and what it looked like when you actually finished. How much time did it take? What were the big challenges, and how did you personally overcome the challenges? What was your process that led to your success? What skills did you actually use to do this? What did you actually contribute, and at what level? What was the biggest problem you had to address? How did you address it? What was the biggest decision you had to make? How did you go about making it? It's very important for me to understand where you took the initiative. These are the things that would not have happened had you not made them happen. So I'd like you to give me 3 examples of initiative. Of all the work you did, what did you like the most? What was your favorite part? What was the stuff that got you out of bed in the morning and said, I really enjoy doing this? And you spent a lot of time on it, and you learned new things about it. What were the parts that you didn't like as much? The things that if you could have delegated, you would have delegated. And then finally, after everything is said and done, were you recognized by anyone for having done this? And if so, what was the recognition? Was it appropriate? Now imagine that I sit in the room and I ask about your biggest accomplishment, your biggest professional accomplishment, and I ask you those types of questions, and I spend 10 to 12, 15 minutes on one accomplishment. Do you think at the end of that exercise I would know something about you? What do you think? Would I gain insight into who you are and what you're capable of doing by conducting an interview in this fashion? Susan, thank you for responding. The rest of you can put that in too. Yeah, I think I would have great insight into who you are and what you're capable of doing. And I'm going to do this in a couple of ways. I would get direct insight into competencies, skills, behaviors, comparable results, leadership, achiever pattern, cultural fit, managerial impact, trend of growth. By the way, that list there, it kind of matches the list that you gave me of top performers. And I guarantee for every accomplishment, I'm going to get 6 to 8 competency, skills, or behaviors that drove their success on what they actually did. That's the methodology, and it works very, very good, very, very well. And that's all I can give you sort of as part of today. But we asked the MSA question multiple times to view trend of performance and growth over time. That's what we do, and that's how we focus on it. And so we'll ask about accomplishments in different time periods. So in different jobs, we'll ask about individual accomplishments. We'll ask about team accomplishments. And then we'll make sure that in those accomplishments we're covering job-specific accomplishments, meaning accomplishments that are most relevant to the type of work they will be doing in the job you're hiring them to do. And we know what those are because we spec'd them in the performance profile before we started. As I hear answers, I'm thinking in my mind, how does that accomplishment match what I want done? Is it bigger, smaller, more technical, less technical, bigger budget, smaller budget, bigger team, smaller team? Is it comparable in scope? I'm trying to put that all together so I can identify that opportunity gap that we spoke about a moment ago. All right. Now, here are the traits that we're looking for. And I mentioned this is one of the disruptors, measuring quality of hire before we hire somebody. You think about how you measure quality of hire right now. You measure it 6 months after somebody starts in their first performance review, or you do it a year after their first performance review. That's too late. It's too late. We need to know what the quality of hire is going to be before we hire them. And so let me give you what the traits are. These are the things that must be true. They have to have a track record of comparable results. They have to be able to problem solve at the right level for the job we're hiring them into. They have to have an achiever pattern and a trend of growth, personal growth and knowledge. They have to be able to work well with teams. They have to organize their own time and the time of others and manage themselves and others. And then they have to have the basic skill set, experience, and education necessary to perform well. That's above the line. Now below the line, we've got these three things which are critical. They have to match our culture, and they have to be a good fit for the manager. That's cultural and managerial fit. They have to want to do the job. That's job fit. It has to be something they're interested in, they're intrigued by. And then the job itself needs to be a career move. That's where the 30% solution comes in. If all of these things are true, my contention is this is going to be a good fit. It's going to be a good hire for us. And so these are the things that we need to assess. We have a scorecard, which we call the performance-based, the quality of hire scorecard, which allows us to do these types of things. Now, let me make another sort of offer on how you can take this to the next level. We do allow recruiting leaders. So if you're a recruiting leader, you have recruiters reporting to you, and you want to audit our online training for performance-based hiring for recruiters, just send us an info@adlerconcepts.com, an email, and say, I'm interested in auditing the course to evaluate it for my team. And we will allow you to come and come to Module 1 and sit through it and understand the concepts that we teach in that module at a much greater depth. And you can get a sense for how we interact online and how we teach. So that's my second offer, and something that I hope you will take us up on if you're a recruiting leader. Now, getting back to the quality of hire scorecard, the goal here is to measure this before we hire people. And in a bit, I'm going to show you the quality of hire scorecard, what it actually looks like. Now, remember the goal is to hire top 25%. I talked a little bit about talent-centric sourcing and building the A-team. We call this the 40-40-20 sourcing plan. And the truth of the matter is we've done a lot of research with LinkedIn and with other companies about where good candidates are, what they're actually doing to find work, what they're not doing to find work, have they updated resumes, how active are they in the marketplace. And our recommendation is that if you're looking at a scarce talent market, 20% of your hires should come from people who responded to an ad or the active channel. 40% should come from outbound marketing, meaning you are targeting an audience and marketing to that audience, and you're selecting that audience. And 40% are going to come from networking and from different paths. So we call that the 40-40-20 path. And if you look at the breakdown of the marketplace, what percent of candidates are in different categories, 21% of the market's super passive, 43 explorers, 20% tiptoe or 13% tiptoers, 23% very active. Depending on how scarce your talent pool is, you may have to adjust the percentages from 20-40-40 to 5-20-50 and 25, which you see down at the bottom. But the goal is to move our candidate pool. When we look at recruiting organizations, one of the things we look at is what's the slate of candidates and where do they come from? And this is a good question for you. I want you to think about the last 10 candidates your hiring managers saw from you if you're a recruiter. And if you're a manager, I want you to think about where those candidates came from. You may not know, but if you're a recruiter, you should know. And if all the candidates you put forth, you presented, 95% of them are from ads, you're leaving really good talent on the table. Now, if it's a very easy search and you've got a surplus, that may be the case, but typically it's not. So we want to adjust this, and we want to focus on finding A-level talent that is right and that it's clearly a career move. And we're going to use that in the tiptoe and explorer category, which, by the way, that's the sweet spot for sourcing talent. Explorers are very interesting because they're not doing anything to find work, but they're open to conversations. And tiptoers, they put their toe in the water by talking to a few friends and alerting a recruiter they worked with in the past, but they're not going out looking at all sorts of opportunities online yet. They're not in the very active category. You've got to recruit these people, and you've got to be good from getting referrals from those people. And that's one of the things in the recruiter performance-based hiring for recruiters course. We spend a lot of time on networking and having these conversations and what you say to them. And I'll give you one idea now. If I'm calling an explorer and I want to get their attention, this is what I'll say to them. I ask them this question: would you be open to explore a new career opportunity if I can show you it's clearly better than what you're doing today? That's our initial pitch. And then in the course, we actually teach what follows up from that, how you do that, and how you get people involved. But I'll tell you this, If somebody says yes to that, and 93.7% of explorers will say yes to that question, we've tested it, the very worst thing you could do is tell them about the job in the next interaction. And that's what most recruiters do. The very best thing you can do is say something like, that's great, let's do this. Why don't you give me a quick 2-minute overview of what you're doing right now? And then I'll give you a quick 2-minute overview of the job. And if it looks like this is truly a career move, we'll have a much more in-depth discussion and set up a time to do that. And then you let the candidate talk and you get their work history, and then you can decide whether you're going to move forward with them. So that's just one methodology we talk about in the broader training. The goal is to get to the top 25% of the talent market. And in order to do that, you can't just source the active candidate pool. One of the ways we do that is finding high-quality nodes to get more referrals. And a node is somebody who is worthy to be recruited for the position, or someone who is well-connected, who knows who is good at the work you want done. And we spend a lot of time identifying what those are in our situation, okay? Now, I will say this. We don't have time on an overview to teach you much about Boolean searching, but we can say this. If you are going out and you're searching in LinkedIn to find top quality people, one of the things that we teach in the course is, how do I get top 25% people by putting in terms that filter in the best people? So you see an example that came up on your screen. We have the normal search terms, skills-oriented search terms, but then we add award or honor, or the honor society relevant to their particular profession, Beta, Gamma, Sigma in this case. And that filters our results down to people who have in their profiles award or honor, or they're a member of that honor society. What we find is we get to a higher quality starting point for our networking and targeting for that outbound emailing and our employee referral programs and our proactive employee referral programs than if we just start with just the skills terms. So that's just another thing that we can do. This is an example of somebody we found. And what's interesting, if you delve into, this was for a product marketing person, but if you see this person, you see that they were highly honored. They had honors, awards. You can look and you can see different things in their profile that make sure that they're in the top 25%. Harvard Business School, Masters of Business Administration. And you can see their progression is good, and you can see that they've won different honors and awards for different things. And they're being recognized, and they're in honor societies. So that's the type of person we want to go after as we utilize LinkedIn. That's a top 25%er. All right? So now we've got some of the building blocks for what we're talking about. Now let me ask this question. And I'll ask this specifically of the recruiting professionals on the line here. When you present a candidate to your managers, do they know if that candidate is active or passive in the marketplace? Do you make it a point to explain to them that they've got a passive candidate and what that actually means? Or are you just giving them, yeah, Angela says yes. Perfect. I know a lot of managers who, even if you explain it to them, they don't know what to do with that information. So it's not enough just to say, hey, we've got a passive candidate. They have to understand what that looks like and what their role is in that. And frankly, one of the things we teach in the course, we give tools in the courses. One of those tools is interviews. We have a phone screen. But for passive candidates, we have a very different phone screen. It's called an exploratory interview, because you cannot treat a passive candidate like you treat an active candidate. You send a passive candidate to a manager, and the first words out of the manager's mouth are, so why do you want to work for our company? That passive candidate has that bewildered, confused look on their face and says, I don't. You guys called me. And then the conversation spirals down from there. So we want to talk about recruiting passive candidates, and I'll just give you some things to think about in this area. When you first call a candidate, you're a recruiter or you're a manager having a conversation with a passive candidate. There is a criteria to engage. This is what passive candidates want to know before they'll even invest time with a recruiter who calls them. And it's a very narrow list, and it's very short term, by the way. They want to know what's the title of the position, what's the company, what's the compensation, what's the location, what's the job. And all of that is, while important, it is not good criteria for filtering an opportunity. And if you fast forward 3 weeks when they're actually engaged and they've gone to several interviews, their criteria to accept is fundamentally different from their criteria to engage. And it's in a very different order. Their criteria to accept starts with, is this really a career opportunity for me? Is this something I really want to do? Is the job something that I can sink my teeth into? Can I learn something there? Can I make an impact? Is the hiring manager somebody I can learn from? Somebody who I really want to work with? Do they have a track record of developing talent like me, helping me get to the next level? Is the team a valuable team? Can I learn from them? Do I feel good about the team? Then comes compensation. Then work-life balance, if that's important to the individual. Then the company, the culture, and the mission. Now, great recruiters and hiring managers know that in order to recruit a passive candidate, you have to switch the criteria and not engage on short-term criteria, but engage on career move criteria. That's the stuff in that second box. The criteria to engage is what you get day one when you walk into a job. The criteria to accept is year one and beyond. So when we make the case for a career move for a candidate, we are really focusing on year one and beyond. What is the EVP? Why would somebody want to come? This is a very different conversation, and it's a very important conversation to have. Great jobs plus engaged hiring managers plus strong recruiters equal top talent. And great recruiters and managers know how to navigate this discussion with a candidate so they're not losing a candidate on the phone to a transactional recruiting process. Hey, I got this great job. It's in Topeka, Kansas. It pays this. It's a manager level. Do you want it? That is a transactional approach. It's not consultative. It is not how you're going to get top talent. You're going to get hiring managers engaged earlier in the process. Okay? The active pool, not more than 20%. But if you use the right criteria, you can actually filter really good people out of that active candidate pool. The passive candidate pool, you're going to narrow that to the top 25%, and 80% of the people that you actually see should be coming from the passive candidate pool. That's our contention. Active is fast, passive is a little bit slower. So that's recruiting and hiring active and passive candidates. Very, very important concept as we go through here. Now, this is our contention. If you've read Good to Great, you know that there's a metaphor about getting the right people on the bus. Getting the right people on the bus and keeping the right people on the bus, and we believe this applies to recruiting as well. Our goal is to go out and rather than offer 300 people an opportunity, we're going to offer 20 people. Our goal is to get 20 highly qualified, highly networked people on the bus, people who we can recruit directly or people that we can use as nodes to actually find people. And we're going to use the 30% solution to get them on the bus. And it requires consultative recruiting to do that. So let me describe how we look at this. Every candidate is on a trajectory. They've got a career path. They've got a job. They either like the job or they don't like the job. They're being challenged or they're not being challenged. And so when we engage with candidates, and here's how the dialogue goes. We tell them, look, this job has to be a real career move. Let me define what a career move is. A career move means that the job itself has stretch in it for you. There's something that you can learn in this job. And if you do well in this job, there's growth. You can become something better. In fact, you're on a steeper, not only learning curve, but you're on a steeper growth curve, meaning if you do well in this job, your potential to go to the next level and the next level is much higher. And the job satisfaction is there. If I can offer somebody a job that's got a 10% stretch or a 15% stretch, I'm halfway to my 30% solution. If they're going to be much more satisfied with the job, I can get another 5% there. Now I've got to establish that there's some job growth. I might get 5 or 10% there. Now I've got a 30% solution, which means what? It means that I don't have to offer them a huge salary increase to take the job. They will take the job at a modest salary increase because the job itself is intrinsically motivating. Now, good people are going to want a salary increase, but I'm not going to give them a 30%. I'm going to demonstrate value in the job. I'm going to create a career move. I'm going to demonstrate stretch, better job satisfaction, and the potential for greater job growth. And if I do that, I can get them on the bus and keep them on the bus. So that's recruiting and hiring passive candidates. My goal isn't to fill up the bus with thousands of candidates. My goal is to fill up the bus with 20 to 30 highly qualified candidates that I can then recruit and network with. And that's how we're going to find our next top performers. All right? So that's the basis. Now we're coming to the close, and hopefully you have some questions, but let me make my last offer before we go here. If you are a manager and you've got a team of people reporting to you and you want to look at performance-based hiring for your team, we do offer a performance-based hiring for managers class once a month. And the first module of that is also available to audit if you're a leader. And if you want to send us an info@adlerconcepts.com email and say, I'd be interested in auditing module 1 of the manager's course, the hiring manager's course. We call it the HMT. Just send us that and we'll go ahead and do that and get you signed up for that. Now, with all of our courses, you get access to an e-learning center. This is the one for the recruiters, but it includes 24/7 membership for a year. You can become certified. You get all of the documentation and the tool sets. You get wizards. The classes are recorded, so over the course of a year, you can go back and actually take and retake parts of it. And the certification process is a very good thing. You also have the hiring manager intro guide, and you've just got a lot of tools, including Lou Adler's eRecruiter's Handbook, which includes literally 10, 20, 30, 40 scripts for how you actually do recruiting. It's useful for managers and for recruiters. But this is an example of the scripts you get: first contact, objections, qualifying, voicemail scripts, and some of the objections you see right there on the screen. So there's a lot of value in the materials that you get as you go through the course. And that is really the summary of what performance-based hiring is. Now let me drive home the concepts, the disruptors we talked about. We believe that if a company is going to attract top talent, the hiring managers have to really take responsibility for the quality of their teams. They have to be much more involved in the process. And those companies where the managers are highly involved have a much better chance of getting top talent. Second, we believe in less sourcing, less active candidate sourcing and more recruiting. Filling that bus with top people, top 25% people with 20 or 30 people is a much better way to go and will get you much higher quality talent. And then, once again, you should be measuring quality of hire pre-hire. And the way to do that is to define what that looks like in the performance profile, and then to measure that using the quality of hire scorecard. So with that, I'll just open it up for questions and just see if there's anything you would like to ask me or anything you'd like clarification on. Remember the 3 offers. You can just email us at info@louadlergroup.com. I think I said Adler Concepts, both of those work, but you can see the email right on the screen, and JJ's been putting it into chat. So JJ, are there any questions?
I don't see any questions yet, but go ahead and type those in the chat area, especially if there's something that we discussed today that you think might not apply to your specific recruiting environment. We'd love to hear about those as well. And I just typed in there that I'll make sure all 3 offers are in today's follow-up email as well.
Great. So let me ask this question as we wait for any questions in chat. Was this a valuable 45, 50 minutes of your time today? Did you learn something as we went through the overview of the performance-based hiring? Were some of the things you wanted to get that you mentioned at the beginning of the course answered as a result of this? I'm seeing yeses and absolutelys. That's great. If you have any questions, or if you would just like to talk to me about your hiring needs, maybe you're evaluating this for your company and you'd just like to have a chat, feel free to contact me directly at Bryan with a Y, B-R-Y-A-N, at adlerconcepts.com. I'd be happy to have a chat with you, set up a 15-minute block of time where we can just chat about your situation and what you're trying to accomplish. It's interesting to me, I have a lot of people in smaller companies who are investing in training their teams. I just had this one company in California. They're very small. They only have 95 people in the company, but they're going to double their company size over the next 6 months. And they realize that they're not prepared to do that and attract top talent. So they're making a significant investment to bring their team up to speed to do that. And if you happen to be in that boat, I'd love to talk to you about that, because it is definitely worth the time and effort. I've actually used this in 3 startups that I've been in, and it's worked very, very well. All right. So I see a couple of questions coming in here. Is this available? Generally, the audits are available for people who have recruiters who report to them. But you know, give me a call and we might be able to do some sort of overview for their the team. Leanne, the only way to get the scripts really is to sign up for the course. We don't make those available otherwise, but they are a part of that. So I want to answer that question. You know, this is a good question. As a hiring manager, how do I get my internal recruiter on board in HR? And Edward, I would just say to you, there are a couple of ways to seed these ideas. There is a, and you may have seen this already, but there's a 12-minute overview of this online that I would send to your recruiter. And it's right on our website, and it'll take them 12 minutes, and you can ask them to view it and say you want to talk to them about it. That's one way. Second way, we just launched a mini course on lynda.com, and it's performance-based hiring. It's an hour and 15-minute course. If you sign up for Lynda, it's $24 a month. You can go and you can watch any program you want, or you can get a 30-day trial and cancel it, but go watch the course. That might be another way to expose them to it. And then we do the sneak peek once or twice a month. Sign them up for this, bring them next time, and we'll be happy to do it. So those are 3 ways to get involved that I think would be valuable for you. Good questions. Now, we have recorded this session, and we will make it available. And that's another way to maybe do this is we'll give you the link to that, and you can send your recruiter to that. All right. Any other questions, JJ, that come to mind before we end? I think we're almost at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to the end, and I don't see any other questions come through. But if you do have questions, you can always send those to info@louadlergroup.com. We'll get back to you right away with those answers.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you online at our performance-based hiring for recruiters or managers courses. I am doing a live course in Denver on May 5th, so if you happen to be in the Denver area or want to fly on over, it's a live performance-based hiring for recruiters course, and we do those mostly privately. We do very few public ones, so it might be an opportunity if you happen to be local. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Great. Thanks, Brian, and thanks, everyone. As I mentioned, you will be getting a follow-up email in your inbox in about an hour with some of those offers that Brian talked about during the class. And we look forward to seeing you on future Adler Group webinars. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.